Okay, so today we are going to be doing Chapter 8, Lesson 5, where we left off in my math book. This lesson is all about simplest form. So, first off, we're going to do our vocabulary word for simplest form. So, a fraction is in simplest, so this is your vocab term, simplest form when its numerator and denominator have no common factor other than 1. So, that is the definition of simplest form. That's what we're learning about today. Now, for a quick reminder, if you forgot what a numerator was or you forgot what a denominator is, I'm going to show you very quickly right here. 1 over 2. 1 is the numerator. 2 is the denominator. Remember the trick I taught you. If you have a hard time remembering which one's the numerator of a fraction, which one's the denominator of a fraction, the D of denominator, since it starts with the D, it also is telling you that it stands for down, which is the down part of the fraction. So, just a quick reminder of what a numerator and a denominator are. Now, moving on from simplest form. So, in order to find a fraction in its simplest form, like here, 1 over 2 is in its simplest form, we have to do this thing, finding the greatest common factor that the numbers of the fraction share. So, I'm going to show you that. So, in order to do that, in order to write the fraction in simplest form, what you have to do, and remember when I put a star, this is important. So, to write a fraction in simplest form, you divide the numerator and denominator by the, and now because I'm taking up too much room, I'm going to call the greatest common factor, I'm going to do by the greatest common factor. And I'm going to put in parentheses GCF, just an acronym to refer to the greatest common factor. So, now we're going to talk about the greatest common factor. This is going to be the definition of a greatest common factor. Let me find. So, the greatest common factor is the greatest. So the greatest, which means the largest, because some numbers are going to have more than one common factor. You're going to choose the largest number. Is the greatest of the common factors of 2 or more numbers. So, it seems like a lot, and it is, but I promise once I show you what I'm talking about in terms of the greatest common factor and simplest form, you will get what I'm saying. So, an example. This is what would happen, let's say, in your book. The example. The directions would be to write 8 over 12 in simplest form. That would be your directions, and that would be your problem. So write 8 over 12 in simplest form. Well, if you already forgot what simplest form is, let's go back over to the top. So a fraction is in simplest form when its numerator and denominator have no common factor other than 1. So in order to figure out the factors of a number, you must first do that, and then that's where the greatest common factor comes into play. Once you find all the factors of a number, then you see which one is the greatest one they share, and then you divide it by that number. So we have to find the greatest common factor for 8 over 12. So first, I'm going to find all the factors that go into 8. So let's take 8. When I'm thinking about the factor pairs that can make up 8, I know that 1 over 8 will give me 8, and I know that 2 and 4. These are all the factors that can give me 8. So I did the numerator in 8 over 12. Now I must find all the factors of the denominator of 12. So here's 12. Now I'm going to find all the factor pairs. So I will do 1 over 12, or 1 and 12, that will give me 12. Then 2 and 6, that will give me 12 as well. And then 3 and 4 will give me 12. So these are all the factors for the number 12. So now this is where it's very important, because we are looking for the greatest common factor, because there are going to be numbers that share. There's going to be factors that both the numerator and the denominator share, but you need to choose the greatest, meaning the largest number that they share. So if I'm looking at all the factors, I'm going to find the ones that they share. So I see they share 1 and they share 1, but 1 is the least of the factors that they share. Remember, we're looking for the greatest number. So I know 1 is not going to give me the simplest form. So I go on and I look to see what other numbers they share. Okay, right here I see that they share 2 as well. But 2 is not the greatest factor that they share. It's not the greatest common factor. So I'm going to keep looking. So now I'm comparing, and I see right here that the greatest common factor that both the numerator and the denominator share is 4. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. You could also circle it. 4 is the greatest common factor that 8 and 12 share. So in order to put it in simplest form, now you are going to divide the numerator and denominator by, and remember the acronym, the GCF. GCF here stands for greatest common factor. It's just harder because I ran out of room, but that's what it stands for. In this problem, the greatest common factor that they share is 4. So I'm going to show you that doing that here. So I write my fraction again, 8 over 12. Then I'm going to divide the 8 by 4. And I'm also going to do the same for my denominator. So this is how we are getting the simplest form. 8 divided by 4 is going to give you 2. Then 12 divided by 4 will give you 3. Now, 2 over 3 is the simplest form of the fraction of 8 over 12. How do you know it's in the simplest form? Because remember, the fraction is in the simplest form when its numerator and denominator have no common factors other than 1. So if I go back to my simplest form to see if I'm right, well, I know that 1 and 2 are the only numbers that can give me 2. And then I go to 3, and then I see 1 and 3 are the only factors that will give me 3. So the only factors that this fraction shares is 1. So 2 over 3 is the simplest form. So that is simplest form. I'm going to do one more quick example, so pay attention with me. As long as you feel comfortable in knowing the factors of a number, this should be very easy putting it in simplest form. So let's see, write 6 over 8, that's an 8, my writing is messy. Write 6 over 8 in simplest form. So your first step, put a 1 if you want to do steps. You are going to find the factors that make up 6 and 8. So I'm going to do that right here. So I'm finding it for the 6, which is the numerator, and then I'm finding all the denominators for 8. Or I'm finding all the factors for 8, which is the denominator. So here's 6. So I know that the factors that make it up are 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Those are the only factor pairs that would give me the number 6. So I finished with the numerator. Now I'm going to find the factor pairs for 8. So 1 and 8 will give me 8, and then 2 and 4 will do it as well. So now the second step, now that I found all the factor pairs, is to find the greatest common factor. That's the GCF. So then I'm going to use these numbers. So find the greatest common factor from these numbers. You have to find the one that is the largest number. So yes, they share 1 as a common factor, but it's not the greatest. 2 is the greatest common factor that 6 and 8 share. So go ahead and circle that. I'm also going to highlight it. So 2 is the greatest common factor. That's the second step, is finding the greatest common factor. Your last step, step 3, is to divide the numerator and denominator by, yes, if you're following along, it is by the greatest common factor, which is 2. So then I'm going to take my fraction, which is 6 over 8, and divide it by 2. Divide it by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So then ask yourself, if you're going to check if 3 over 4 is the simplest form of 6 over 8, ask yourself, what are the factors that make up 3 and what are the factors that make up 4? If the only factor that it shares is 1, it's in its simplest form. So 1 and 3 will give me 3, and those are the only factors. Then 1 and 4 are the only factors that will give me 4. 1 is the only factor that they share, so 3 over 4 is the simplest form. And that is the end of this lesson. That simplest form, and we will go over it later today.